Hi friends, I hope you're all doing well. If you watched last week's video, the shape of this burgundy paper is like the one I used for day 16. I'm drawn to this shape even though it's a block shape, which I'm trying not to use too much of. I had another design idea using this shape that I wanted to try. It's another simple design, but it does work with different proportions and strong light and dark values. Also, I've noticed that I'm drawn to this light aqua color. You may notice if you do a similar daily challenge that you become drawn to similar shapes and colors. This is how to start finding your style of art. I have always used all the colors of the rainbow, but it's good to notice what colors are ones that you like to use most. Also, my color choices can be affected by my mood. Sometimes that's subconsciously. Many of the collages I've liked so far from this daily practice have a muted color palette. It could be because of the time of year, which is fall. At this point, the two large elements are glued in place, and I'm starting to add smaller accent elements. Since the light aqua element has a vertical orientation and the burgundy one takes up a large portion of the substrate, I wanted the smaller ones to have a horizontal orientation. I like the basic design of this collage. It's one that I can see using as an inspiration for a larger one. The grayscale version could be used as is. The light values are the substrate and the light aqua element. The mid-tone value is the small orange accent, and the dark values are the large burgundy element and the small brown one. For this next collage, I wanted to start with a dark value painted ground. I didn't want to use black paint, which is my usual go-to dark color, so I chose burnt umber. I'm continuing to lean into a fall color palette. As you can see, I poured out too much paint to use on this small substrate. This happens a lot when I paint. I usually keep out a sketchbook or an art journal so I can apply any leftover paint onto those pages. It's off camera so you don't see it, but I did apply the leftover paint on a few pages. I really like the worn look of this monoprinted paper, so I wanted to use as much of it as possible. The torn piece has a good organic shape. Also, it will be used as a large light value element. The other papers for this collage will be smaller and thinner. I thought I wanted to use an orange color paper next. I just needed to decide on a strong orange color or a lighter, more textural color. This dark red scrap caught my eye. I like the dark value, the shape of the scrap, and I thought it would work well against the dark brown ground and the large light element. I ended up deciding on the strong orange scrap instead. The collage needed another thinner element above the orange one. This light blue with an orange pattern would work. The orange pattern will tie in with the orange element. I really like this simple design collage. As I mentioned, I'm gravitating towards fall colors, so that's the reason why I like it. Also, I like the organic shape of the elements. The grayscale version mimics the original in that it has strong light and dark values. I'm leaving the substrate as is this time. It won't be painted. This is a painted used tea bag paper. If I remember correctly, I used cut papers to create a mask for the unpainted areas so I could apply the blue paint in between. This ephemera will give a similar look to painted deli papers. I only wanted to use a sliver of it as an accent element. I'll add music while you watch me decide on the other papers to use, their shapes and placements. I'll come back to discuss the final collage and its grayscale version. Another simple design, but I think it works well as is and as an inspiration for a larger collage. The grayscale version has strong light and dark values, which is one of the things I wanted to work on with this daily practice. I decided that I wanted to start this next collage with a dark value painted ground. This time I'm using Payne's Gray. I'm starting to like using this color instead of black. I pulled this paper not so much for the color, but for the shape. I like the angle cutout, so I wanted to lean into it. The bright green color was a bonus. It'll contrast nicely with the Payne's Gray painted ground. I was unsure if this green element was a light or a mid-tone value, so I was looking for light value papers for the next few elements. This paper was made by applying blue paint on a gel plate, then applying plastic wrap on top of it to get this texture. Then I laid a piece of paper on top of the painted gel plate and pulled the print. It's a great way to get a textural light value paper. This is another monoprinted paper, but this time I used a stencil. I believe it was the second print after the initial pull. The stencil left an impression with the red paint. I covered the gel plate with off-white paint, then I pulled the second print. It's another great way to get a light value paper. I'm trying to fit this paper under the green element so it has the right placement before cutting it. It took a few tries. I thought the angle placement would work, but before cutting it to size, I decided to glue the light blue paper down first. If I'm unsure about one section of the collage, I work on another section. It buys me some time to make a decision. Once the blue paper was glued in place, I knew that I wanted to glue the other paper at an angle. I was concerned about cutting the shape to fit, so I decided to lightly glue the green paper on top of it. This way I knew I could place the paper at an angle I wanted, and these two separate elements would become one. I glued the whole backside of this element, then positioned it into place on the substrate. Once it was glued in place, then it was easy to cut off the excess paper. It took a little effort, but the placement is exactly where I wanted it. The final touch is to break up the large amount of light values. I'm auditioning a dark value teal paper that will be used as a small accent element in this area. Instead of cutting the end straight, by cutting it at an angle, we'll continue the angle of the green element. The different angles of the simple design gives the collage movement. When I talk about movement, I mean that the design helps to move the viewer's eye around the collage. The grayscale version highlights the strong light and dark value elements. There are times when a leftover scrap can inspire a design idea. I like this dark brown scrap as is, so I used it as a starting point for the collage. I thought that its long, dark, organic shape would work well with another dark element. Instead of another torn edge element, this dark red element will have cut edges. It's a small detail to pair torn edge elements with cut edge elements, but it's something to think about when you're working on a small substrate. Since the first two elements are long, narrow, and dark value, I thought the next element should be a light value and a different shape. I defaulted to a block shape. The small stamped element is another deli paper scrap. It could add an interesting accent detail, but I needed to work out the placement. Since I knew I was going to use the brown, the dark red, and the light yellow papers, I decided to glue them in place. Then I could go back to figure out the placement of the stamped deli paper scrap. While gluing the 3 elements in place, another stamped deli paper caught my eye. I decided to audition it to see if it would be a better choice for this collage. As you can see, I liked it better. It fits well on top of the small section of the light yellow paper. Also, I like that it's a partial print. There was a leftover teal scrap from the previous day's collage that fits nicely. It introduced a new color, but it wasn't distracting. I like that you can see a hint of the pattern of the light yellow paper under the deli paper scrap. This is another collage that I can see using it as an inspiration for a larger one. You can see the strong light and dark values in this grayscale version. This is another collage that was inspired by a leftover scrap. The curved shape of this yellow monoprinted scrap inspired the design. I just needed to clean up the inside edge. It took a while to get the right placement and shape of this purple and black paper. I really wanted to use it because I like the color contrast of it against the light yellow curved element. While I decided on the purple and black paper, I pulled out this bright pink paper to see how it would look against the light yellow paper. When I placed the two together, I decided that they would work well. A large piece of this pink paper would fill in the space between the light yellow paper and the two edges of the substrate. I still wanted to use the purple and black paper, but at this point I wasn't sure how. I glued the light yellow shape on top of the bright pink, so separate elements became one element. This way makes it easier to glue them on the substrate in the correct placement. I'm not sure why I thought the map scrap may be a good option in the upper left corner. It was too light for that area. Fortunately, I didn't glue it down right away, but left it unglued while I went back to the purple and black paper. Let me tell you that it was a relief to finally find the right shape and placement of the purple and black paper. Editing this section of the video, it was so hard to relive the uncertainty again. I had a limited time that day to create the collage, and I felt the pressure to finish it. Even though I was in a time crunch, I decided to pull another dark paper for the area in the lower right corner, instead of using another piece of the purple and black paper. I like the pattern of this dark green paper, so I wanted to use it again in this collage. Besides the unnecessary pressure I felt to finish this collage, I'm happy with the way it turned out. It has a bold design, and it's not all muted colors. I like the grayscale version as well, another strong light and dark value design. The design for this week's final collage was loosely inspired by Day 6 collage. I like how the shape of the outside curve of the blue element flows into the inside curve of the burgundy element. I'm not going to mimic this design, but take the two curved elements and build upon it. I'm starting with two main elements, which are dark values. This one will be placed in the upper right area. It curves outwards, and it's narrower than the one that will be placed in the lower section. This dark gray paper will have a curve going inwards, so that both papers together will form a backwards S-shaped curve. I'll be accentuating the curves in both areas by repeating the curve shapes, but with different color papers. As I build this collage, I'm being mindful of having strong light and dark values and having different proportions. I'll add music at this point and come back to discuss the final collage and its grayscale version. This is an interesting design. I can definitely see it as a larger scale collage. I added the long narrow scrap because I thought it would add a small detail that's unexpected. Here's the grayscale version. It reinforces the strong light and dark values. I hope you enjoyed watching the process of creating this week's daily collages. Next week will be the last week of this practice for November. Let me know if you have any questions. I hope to see you next week. Take care.